Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Great to see you on this Sunday. We've got a big day ahead of us here in the world of weather. The storm system we've been forecasting for more than a week now is now beginning to cross through the East Coast and will continue to ramp up and get stronger throughout the day today, overnight tonight, and into tomorrow, bringing with it many impacts, including severe weather, snowfall, very gusty winds, and a lot of rain and potentially even flooding for some folks. So this storm's got it all here for the start of December. It's been a very busy start to the month, but once we get through today and tomorrow, things should begin to simmer down a little bit for at least a week or so. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider doing so. It means a lot to me. It helps the channel grow a lot. And also, if you like the video, make sure to hit that like button, comment, let me know what you're seeing out there. Because again, this storm is continuing to kind of begin to impact more and more viewers. So let me know what you saw yesterday, if you were impacted yesterday. And if you're not going to be impacted until today, let me know what you're seeing out there, as it really kind of helps me verify these forecasts after we make them. Another thing I will say here at the start of this video, and this intro might drag on because of it, but really just want to say thank you to all of you. This week has been pretty remarkable, honestly, in the growth. Last Sunday we hit 2,000 subscribers, and then yesterday, less than a week later, we hit 3,000. So it has been a very impressive week of growth, and I think my top 5 videos on my channel have all come within this past week. So it's just been an insane week, and really thank you to all of you for helping us end the year very strong on this channel. And we've got a lot of time left in this year to continue to kind of pump up those numbers, so we'll definitely continue to do so as we prepare to start 2024, and I think it's going to be a very special year, 2024, for this channel. So again, just want to say thank you to all of you for always coming back and returning and commenting and liking and just everything in general. Okay, I think that's enough of me rambling on. Let's go ahead and get into the forecast now. And again, taking a look out here at our infrared satellite imagery. This storm system, it's not hard to find. Very, pronounced cold front here, digging all the way from the bottom of the screen in the Gulf of Mexico all the way up through the southeast into the mid-Atlantic and even the northeast this morning, having a lot of those very cold cloud tops showing up on our satellite imagery. Now, switching this on over towards our radar imagery, as well as looking at our watches and warnings, you'll notice that the entire Northeast is really just filled with watches and warnings currently, with a lot of folks seeing flood watches up the I-95 corridor from DC into Philadelphia, up towards New York, and even into Boston, and then other folks seeing winter storm warnings or winter weather advisories kind of up here into the Adirondacks of New York State, down towards Albany, up near Montpelier, Vermont, seeing those winter weather warnings in effect for this storm system, as all of this rain we're seeing today will begin to slowly switch over to snow going into the overnight tonight. Now, further south, we do already have some wind advisories up for the Midlands of South Carolina. Our National Weather Service office there in Columbia issuing those for wind gusts likely getting past 40 miles an hour throughout today. And that is going to be a very similar story for much of the mid-Atlantic here, from Savannah, Georgia, all the way up towards Columbia, Charlotte, Raleigh, Norfolk, Richmond. Just very gusty conditions today as this front swings on through, and more importantly, as low pressure begins to develop along that front here into South Carolina and eventually ride up the coastline going into the overnight tonight. All right, so starting things off here with that severe weather threat, we do have a slight risk of severe weather today for sections of eastern North Carolina and extreme eastern South Carolina, from Horry County there, kind of up towards Wilmington, out near Fayetteville, and then up towards Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Now, I'll actually be out storm chasing this threat today, so by the time you're watching this, I'm likely on the road driving out towards that area from Charlotte to kind of try to intercept some of these storms and get some footage of it for all of you to hopefully post on the channel next week. But again, this is a very real threat. Yesterday, we also had a slight risk at this time of the day, and we unfortunately ended up losing 6 lives last night in those tornadoes in Tennessee. So it's just so important that you take every kind of severe weather threat very seriously. Whether it's a slight risk or a marginal risk, I do not care. You have to have a way to get those watches and warnings, especially with storm systems like this that are just so dynamic, and they can change in just like that, the snap of a finger. So very important today. If you're anywhere in the dark green area, make sure to be on your toes, but specifically if you're there in that yellow area on your map, again from Wilmington back towards Fayetteville, down towards Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and up towards Rocky Mount, North Carolina, you got to have a way to get those watches and warnings, and make sure you're keeping an eye on your local forecasters should they need to break into coverage and let you know of any warnings that are ongoing. And again, a big reason we have that slight risk is for the threat of tornadoes today. Again, this is the exact same level threat we had yesterday in Tennessee, and we all unfortunately know how that ended up. Not saying it's going to be the same story in North Carolina today, and obviously we all hope and pray it isn't, but it's just so much better to be safe than sorry whenever we're dealing with days like this. So again, just have a way to get those watches and warnings this afternoon so we can do everything in our power to avoid any sort of loss of life. Okay. Now that we're kind of done with the, scary, not so good toning part of the video, let's kind of switch over and just show you future radar for the rest of the storm system's duration. Now, if you're waking up this morning, you're likely seeing a lot of rain out there here from, again, the Gulf Coast of Florida all the way up the Appalachia chain into sections of New York State and Vermont. And again, if you're kind of watching in the higher elevations of North Carolina into the Virginias up towards Pennsylvania, New York, you might be wondering, well, where's this big time snowstorm everyone's been talking about? It's just raining. Well, this is kind of how the day is going to go. It's likely going to rain for much of the day for just about everyone up and down the East Coast. It's going into tonight, though. That's whenever things kind of switch into another gear as the storm system begins to pull in cold air on the backside, and that overlapping with that moisture, that's when the snow is going to begin. So taking a look at 2 o'clock this afternoon, this is whenever I'm most concerned for severe weather. You'll notice we kind of have this area of some clearing here into eastern South Carolina, eastern North Carolina, and southeastern Virginia. That is going to be a very potent warm sector where low pressure is going to begin to develop here back towards kind of the Athens and Greenville-Spartanburg area of South Carolina, and that is going to begin to really pull up very warm, unstable air out of the Atlantic through the Gulf Stream into this section of the country, and that combined with plenty of very strong winds overlapping that from the upper parts of the atmosphere. Obviously, you'll notice anytime we get crossing winds like that, especially at different speeds, we're going to get plenty of spinning in the atmosphere, and that is going to lead to the potential of some of those tornadoes this afternoon, especially, again, for you folks, I think, in eastern North Carolina, and I'll show you why here in just a moment. So you'll notice we go into 4 or 5 o'clock tonight. Watch all of these cells kind of come in off of the Atlantic. And I see this multiple times a year. This happens. We get these very strong thunderstorms that are easily spinning and easily rotating due to that lack of friction over the ocean. And eventually they'll hit the shoreline and they won't stop rotating. Okay, it takes a while for friction to start doing its job. And these things eventually end up causing tornadoes here near the coastlines of eastern North Carolina. And I think today is going to be a prime example of that. Now, I'm not saying we're going to see massively strong tornadoes, but I think we'll see a couple easily. And again, that's why I'm storm chasing out there. I definitely wouldn't spend the time and the gas money to go out there if I didn't think there was a shot at seeing something. So if that's kind of the information you need to maybe take today a little more serious, then definitely do so. Now, the good news is as we go into the overnight, passing about 7, 8 o'clock, that's when a lot of these strong storms will begin to lose some of their fuel and will also kind of begin to work out into the Atlantic Ocean a little bit more. So things should become more of just a steady rain where we're seeing that severe weather threat, but still don't let your guard down in the overnight because it doesn't take too much instability to allow this wind shear to do its job and spin up a quick tornado. Now, also going into overnight tonight, about that 8 o'clock time frame, we're still seeing very heavy rainfall up and down the I-95 corridor, but this is also about the time we're going to switch over to some heavy wet snowflakes back into the higher elevations of North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, up into extreme western Maryland there, into Pennsylvania, and into New York State. So you'll notice as I continue this ahead into the overnight, look at the shield of snow beginning back towards places like Asheville, up into Boone, North Carolina, up into the high country of Virginia, West Virginia, and also up here into the higher elevations of New York State and up into Vermont, that rain beginning to change over to snow as we approach midnight tonight. Now, by the time we get into about 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, that precipitation shield is finally beginning to pull away from the Carolinas. We'll begin to dry out there and likely still have some snow left on the ground into the higher elevations of North Carolina. But this is also the moment when the low pressure system itself really begins to kind of crank up a little bit. So I think by the time we hit about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, this storm system is going to be below 1,000 millibars in pressure. And that's going to indicate continued strengthening of the storm as it rides up the East Coast. And at this point, this is also when enough cold air could get wrapped around here that maybe places as far south as the triangle of North Carolina, there towards Greensboro, back towards really along the I-85 corridor there between Raleigh and Greensboro, potentially could see a quick burst of what I call white rain, meaning, yeah, it's technically snow, but it's not really going to stick to anything. And I think that'll be a pretty big story kind of in this circled area on your map, where we definitely could see some snow. We could see that rain change over to snow anytime overnight, but impacts are basically going to be none because it's not going to stick to anything. It's going to be snowing just above freezing. The snowflakes are going to be so close to being melted to rain, it's going to literally look like white rain likely falling from the sky. And also the timing here, looking at anywhere from 1 to 4 in the morning, there's just not going to be many people out there to document it. So if you're one of the brave souls that want to stay up that late and hope to see some snowflakes in the floodlight, definitely go for it. But just don't get your hopes up that we see any real accumulation. Now it's going to be a different story back up here into Vermont, upstate New York, and into the higher terrains of Pennsylvania and the Virginias going into overnight tonight, where temperatures will be cold enough and that snow will be coming down hard and heavy enough that we begin to see some accumulations overnight through those regions. Now, another place that is going to kind of be a wild card, I think, going into tomorrow morning as this precipitation shield continues to ramp up, is going to be the I-95 corridor from D.C. up towards Philly and kind of into the New York City area. A lot of our models the past couple days have been showing accumulating snowfall in this area. However, again, my personal opinion is it's going to be more of that white rain if we do see snowfall at all during the early morning hours of tomorrow. Again, I think if you're watching in DC, Baltimore, especially Philadelphia, up into areas of northern New Jersey as well, especially, definitely could see some snow falling tomorrow morning or extremely early in the morning, really from about 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. But accumulations are going to be hard to come by in a lot of those regions. And in a second, when we look at the snowfall map, you'll have a better idea at who's going to really have the best shot at seeing any of that snow accumulate. Okay, so going into tomorrow afternoon, once again, the storm system continuing to crank up, going about 10 a.m. tomorrow, now below 990 millibars, so that wind really going to be picking up at this point. Those snowfall rates likely continuing to increase here into western sections of Vermont, into much of eastern New York State, continuing to see that snowfall during the morning hours of tomorrow. Now, at this point, we could also see some lake effect snow begin to pick up as the winds really begin to funnel into the storm system, and that wind is going to have to cross the lake to do so. So that cold air passing over those still relatively warm lakes could see some very impressive snow squalls here into sections of western Pennsylvania, back towards Erie, up towards Buffalo, and even into sections of Michigan, seeing some of those snow squalls throughout the day tomorrow afternoon. Now that snow and very heavy rain will continue over sections of the Northeast going into tomorrow afternoon before eventually finally passing about sunset tomorrow. Things should calm down and we will then just be left with some good old-fashioned lake effect snow and much cooler temperatures compared to what you're seeing out there right now for really just about everyone east of the Mississippi. So that's the latest timing. That's the latest look at what we're expecting throughout the day today. And I know that was a lot that we just kind of discussed there, but again, pretty important to take a look at all of that. Now, taking a look at our rainfall totals, again, it's going to rain hard and heavy for a lot of folks. Still expecting 2 to 3 inches of rain for a lot of people here, kind of up and down the I-95 corridor from Raleigh out here towards much of New Jersey and especially into southern New England. A lot of rain still to come this afternoon and overnight tonight. And likely, again, even more up here into sections of the Northeast, especially, again, I think from much of coastal New Jersey into Long Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and up into Maine, seeing a lot of rain still, 2 to 3 inches likely. Lesser totals the further west you go, as we're just going to have less of that precipitation shield adding to the rainfall totals. Okay, so that's kind of our snowfall that we're going to look at here. Let's take a look at, that's our rainfall we're going to look at. Now let's take a look at snowfall totals. How much snow are we going to see in everyone's neck of the woods? Okay, so we'll start down here in the Carolinas and Virginia, and you'll notice nothing crazy. Now, once you get in the mountains, that's when things obviously will have a better shot at seeing those more impressive snowfall totals. But again, this is still going to be very elevation driven. Not everyone here in western North Carolina is going to see that snowfall. Especially people above 3,000 feet, I think, have a good shot at seeing that snow, likely 1 to 3 inches maybe. And if you're above kind of 5,000 feet on those really high peaks, especially up here into northern North Carolina, maybe you touch 3 to 4, maybe isolated spots of 5 inches. But other than that, really likely not all that much snow will fall. Now, going up into Virginia, you'll notice a whole lot of nothing back here towards Danville, Richmond, Virginia Beach, and even down into North Carolina. Again, the models hinted maybe some snow falls, but unfortunately for you snow lovers, it's just not going to accumulate to anything. So if you're lucky enough to be up at maybe 3 o'clock in the morning to see a couple snowflakes mix in there at the end, that's awesome. Congratulations. Just don't get your hopes up on any kind of really impressive snowfall totals. Let me also do West Virginia while we're on this map as well. So again, out here into the higher terrains of West Virginia, could see honestly a pretty good dumping of snow. I think the highest elevations could see half a foot of snow out of this, with some of the lower elevations closer to 1 to 3, and then 3 to 5 inches as you kind of go up higher in elevation. So definitely a bit more of a snowstorm there for you folks compared to down in North Carolina, where it won't necessarily be as exciting maybe. Okay, so now taking a look kind of at the DC metro area. Again, I know there's a lot of talk about maybe some snow falling along this kind of corridor from DC up towards Baltimore. Well, the latest forecast from the National Weather Service keeps that kind of accumulation line, if you will, just off towards the north and to the west of DC itself. So again, that kind of tells me they think it probably will snow here from DC to Annapolis, Baltimore, back up towards Wilmington and Dover. Just again, likely not going to stick or accumulate to much of anything at all compared to our friends back here in the Shenandoah Valley, where those highest peaks could get a good dumping of 3 to 5 inches of snow in again the highest elevations. So a lot of folks in this area likely seeing something fall overnight, but as for where is it actually going to stick, you're really going to want to be higher up in elevation. And some of these valleys and lower elevations off towards the north and the west of DC could see the snow quickly accumulate to a dusting, maybe upwards of half an inch in spots. But it's still, the roads should be fine and impact should be pretty limited for a lot of people. All right, now moving this up into Pennsylvania and northbound, this is whenever this thing really turns from just kind of a novelty snow event to more of a winter storm. So you'll notice here in those higher elevations of Pennsylvania, more snow falling back down towards Somerset, maybe 2 to 3 inches of snow up towards St. Mary's, a good inch or two as well. State College likely seeing some of that snowfall, upwards of half an inch possible there. Same story back towards Williamsport, and then kind of those higher elevations up into northeastern Pennsylvania from Hazleton up towards Scranton could get, again, 1 to 3 inches of snow for you folks. But another thing I'll mention, you look down towards Philadelphia and the I-95 corridor, still no accumulations. Again, could snow, just more of a novelty event than anything back towards that area. Okay, now taking a look at New York State here. And again, I think New York State and Vermont are going to be the two states that really kind of benefit the most out of some of these snowfall totals with this storm system, especially looking up here kind of towards the Adirondacks. We could see upwards of a foot of snow out of this storm system. All right, so going through some smaller communities here, or maybe not smaller communities, but just communities as a whole. Utica, maybe half a foot of snow out of this thing. Syracuse, I think 3 to 5 inches, a pretty good bet. Up towards Watertown, again, 3 to 5 inches, pretty fair. But once you get up here again, kind of into the extreme higher elevations up towards the Adirondacks, half a foot to a foot of snow, very likely for you folks, as that snow's really coming down hard and heavy for multiple hours, overnight tonight and into tomorrow. One more thing I can mention on this map, because I don't think, it doesn't show it on the next map. Again, down here towards New York City, back down towards Long Island and into much of Connecticut and Massachusetts, outside of extreme western Massachusetts. Again, not much out of this. It's really going to be more of a rainstorm than anything, as you're just going to be, unfortunately, in that warm sector of the storm really the entire time until the precipitation cuts off and that cold air funnels in with drier air and preventing, really any kind of snowfall accumulation. Okay, last place to look at here in terms of snowfall totals, up here into New England, and this is one of those kind of, maybe not weird storms, but one of those unique storms that much of the state of Maine isn't really going to see any snow out of it, but if you're back towards kind of Vermont and into northern New Hampshire, you're going to see plenty of it. Burlington, Vermont, likely half a foot of snow or so falling, but just into these higher mountains, I think they're called the Green Mountains, I want to say, back here just to the east of Burlington, again, upwards of a foot, maybe even more than that, of snow likely to fall with this storm system as it continues to crank up off the coastline. And we could see some snow here in extreme western Maine, but really for the most part, much of the state of Maine likely not seeing much snow unless you're on that western border with Canada. Could see a couple of inches out of this thing before all is said and done. Okay, so that's the snowfall total, that's the severe weather, that's the rainfall. It feels like we've got an endless amount of things to talk about. Well, there's one more. We do have to talk about those wind gusts before we kind of end the video here. So we'll start with the mid-Atlantic here. Going into this afternoon and evening, you'll notice, again, a pretty gusty day for a lot of folks here, kind of east of the mountains in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. It's going overnight tonight, though, that we get that extra surge of energy in the atmosphere that's really going to lead to those gusty winds. Look at some of these. Going kind of towards 8 o'clock to midnight tonight, Columbia, South Carolina could get winds gusting up near 50 miles an hour. And if you're up on the higher peaks in North Carolina, it could be gusting near hurricane strength at times. So a lot of wind energy in the atmosphere. And it will continue to stay windy overnight into eastern North Carolina, getting up to 45, 50 mile an hour wind gusts as we kind of pass the midnight hour and, go further into the evening. Now, the good news is by the time we're waking up tomorrow morning, the winds should calm down in the Carolinas and Virginia. But that, unfortunately, is when they pick up for our friends up here into New England. So overall, not too gusty today in this part of the country, but going into overnight tonight and especially into tomorrow morning, look at these very strong winds coming down again out of the Great Lakes into Pennsylvania, New Jersey, gusting up towards tropical storm strength. But really, the place we're most concerned about for those wind gusts are right here in coastal New England, from Rhode Island up through Massachusetts and into the coastline of Maine. You'll notice some of these wind gusts getting up near 60, 65 miles an hour. So very strong winds as the storm system continues to strengthen and that pressure gradient force really takes over, and we see very strong wind gusts into the early morning hours of tomorrow, as well as into tomorrow afternoon, before, luckily, I think going into Monday evening and overnight Monday into Tuesday, those wind gusts should calm down. Okay, I know I said that was the last thing I was going to talk about, but I got one more thing to kind of mention here before we move on. So taking a look at those temperatures, again, I do expect going into the backside of the storm a pretty big cool down. So it's warm for a lot of folks right now, but you'll notice going into kind of Monday overnight and Tuesday, those cooler temperatures begin to once again take back over for much of the East Coast. And that, of course, will be the byproduct of that cold air funneling in behind this storm system. So just figured I'd mention that really quickly just because, Tuesday really isn't that far away. So kind of figured we should look ahead at least just a little bit. Okay, again, that was a lot. That was a bit of a gauntlet to get through here, but I think we got a lot of really good information in there, and maybe not a short period of time, but a manageable amount of time. Now, tomorrow's video, we won't have that much more to talk about with this storm system as we kind of begin to wrap things up and focus on whatever the next storm might be, which could be coming next weekend, but I think that one won't be quite as impactful as this weekend storm, which is definitely some good news, because I know a lot of us could use a break from the crazy weather that we've been seeing the past couple of days. So again, just kind of a heads up, tomorrow's video, maybe a little shorter, maybe a little more short and sweet and simple. And also, to be honest, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little exhausted after this week, because it's just been a lot going on, and doing this is obviously something I love doing, but of course takes time and energy to wake up this early in the morning and talk about the weather for almost 30 minutes. With that said, though, again, have a great rest of your Sunday. Make sure you're staying safe out there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.